to Unsightly Opinions. My name's Tamara. Today, we are going to be talking about if a guide dog is right for you. I've been a guide dog user for well over a decade now. I've had 3 dogs from 2 different schools. I've explored a variety of different training methodologies, and I want to share some of those insights with you today. This video is not to try and sway you one way or the other, but to try and give you some ideas about what guide dog life is like, why you might want to choose a guide dog or not, and some questions you should ask yourself if you're looking into getting a guide dog to know when the time is right. While I choose to be a guide dog user, I recognize that a guide dog is not the right choice for a lot of people. And while this video is primarily geared towards those who are in the blind or low vision community, it might also be interesting to those of you who are sighted, who just want to know more about guide dogs and how they work. I want to structure this video into 3 main sections. First, the physical requirements to get a guide dog in terms of vision and physical ability. The second section talking about questions you should ask yourself, some possible limitations and advantages to using a guide dog over other mobility tools. And the third section talking about how to choose the correct school for your particular needs. As always, if you enjoy content like this, you can subscribe to the channel, you can like, you can engage in any way, leave comments, and you can let the algorithm know that this channel exists. But with the preamble out of the way, let's dive into section number 1, the physical requirements to get a guide dog. When it comes to vision, most guide dog schools will have a cutoff somewhere around legal blindness. While this is not a hard and fast rule, most guide dog schools will require a severe visual impairment or legal blindness in order to apply to get a guide dog. If you have vision above the legal blindness level, you will have to look on a school-by-school basis to see if the school is going to meet your particular needs or your visual ability. There's a common belief in society in general, and I've even seen this in the blindness and low vision community, that you need to be 100% completely, totally blind to get a guide dog. That is not the case. I know many people who are just on the cusp of legal blindness who benefit from a guide dog, and I know people who are completely blind who benefit from a guide dog. If you feel a guide dog is the right decision for you, if your visual ability limits you significantly, it might be the right decision for you. But again, it's a very personal choice. In terms of physical ability, most guide dog schools require their handlers to be quite active. So what that means is you need to be able to travel a significant distance to be able to use a guide dog. Each guide dog school has a specific requirement, whether it's half a mile, half a kilometer, to be able to travel independently. If you cannot travel those distances or you're quite sedentary, a guide dog may not be right for you. There are specific instances if you have other physical limitations or disabilities. They do sometimes train wheelchair guide dogs as well, but you have to look at the specific school because not every guide dog school is going to do that. If you meet the physical requirements, let's talk about section number 2, which is questions you should ask yourself to decide if a guide dog is going to be a benefit or a hindrance to your life. The first question is a multi-parter. Are you comfortable around dogs? Are you fearful of large dogs? Are you able to be around large dogs for a long period of time? Most guide dogs and handlers have to form a bond to work well together. If you enjoy your partnership, if you work well together, typically that creates a better bond between you and your guide. It is a very different experience to have a guide dog or a living being as your partner versus having a cane or a wheelchair. Because it is a living, breathing, feeling animal, you do have to work together, you have to communicate well together, and you have to be assertive and not domineering, but you have to let your dog know what the boundaries are. So if you're comfortable with that, that's great. Some people aren't, and that might be a reason that they choose not to work with a guide dog. The next question you should ask yourself is, are you active? Are you active in your community? Do you go places frequently enough to warrant needing a guide dog? Because there's such a long wait list for people who need guide dogs, typically they will prioritize individuals who are busy, who are out in the community regularly, who are active, who go lots of different places to make sure that the dogs are getting used. If you're sedentary, you'll be lower on the wait list, or they'll give you a different type of dog rather than somebody who's going to be very active. The third question you should ask yourself is, are your orientation and mobility skills strong enough to use a guide dog? Most schools will require you to be a competent white cane user or to have good orientation and mobility skills prior to obtaining a guide dog. Some guide dog schools do provide additional training prior to applying for a guide dog, or do additional orientation and mobility training with the intent that you will eventually get a guide dog, so you can also look into those programs if you're not comfortable with your current level of orientation and mobility. And they can help guide you through that process of when that's right or when you are going to be able to handle a dog effectively. The fourth question you should ask yourself is, are you comfortable losing the tactile feedback that you'd get from using a white cane? If you're not sure what that means, go out for a long walk with somebody under sighted guide. Are you comfortable only getting the tactile feedback from your feet and possibly through the handle or the arm of the person you're holding on to? Are you going to be able to keep your balance? Are you going to be able to keep oriented without that constant contact from the cane? While I'd say initially if you are not, that's not a deal breaker, but it is something that you're going to have to get used to, because guide dog travel and cane travel are very different in terms of the tactile contact you get with your environment. There are some very specific circumstances where you might have your guide dog with you and use your white cane, but typically your dog would not be guiding you at the same time as using your cane. The fifth thing you should ask yourself is, are you going to be comfortable with the additional public contact you're going to receive when you have a dog? I have found that when I'm a cane user, I typically get left alone. I don't have people interrupting me or asking me questions nearly as much as when I have a guide dog. I've found that people find dogs to be very engaging. And while this is a very positive thing for some people because they want to chat with people, they want to interact socially when they're out and about, it can be really disruptive to other people when you get stopped frequently and asked about your dog. But before you apply, make sure that you're comfortable with that, because it is an inevitability. The fifth thing you should ask yourself is, are you going to be able to handle service denials emotionally and physically? I have been in many circumstances where I have been denied access because of my service dog, because people don't understand what the laws are. It can be very frustrating, it can delay you, it can take you longer to get places because you have a guide dog, and that can be a big deterrent for a lot of people. I have found the most serious occasions of service denial I have ever seen are typically at restaurants and at rideshare services. Usually in restaurants, if somebody doesn't understand that bringing a service dog into a dining room is not a health violation. Usually explaining that it's a law is enough to get you past, and if not, you do a quick dial to the non-emergency police line and they're able to inform them. With Uber and Lyft or other rideshare platforms, there again are laws and policies in place to prevent that, but it does still happen and it can delay you. If you want to know my full thoughts on Uber and Lyft's policies and where I think things can be improved, you can check out my other video I did recently where I talk about service denials using service dogs on Uber and Lyft. It'll be listed in a card above and in the description down below. The next thing you should consider is the expense of having a guide dog. It's a lot more expensive than a cane, even if a lot of the expenses are covered by your guide dog school, and we'll talk about that more in the next section. When you have a guide dog, you're typically covering the costs of their food, vet bills, toys, beds, equipment, anything that they need besides their harness. And those expenses can add up. Vet bills can be very expensive. Giving them deworming medication, again, can be very expensive. So you need to make sure that you're financially secure enough to take care of your dog. Some guide dog schools will pay for some or all of those expenses, but again, that's going to be a consideration when you're choosing your school. The next question you should ask yourself is, are you going to be able to maintain your dog's training? When you get your guide dog, they will be fully trained, but you have to maintain that training throughout their life. The training never ever stops. Whether you're doing obedience drills, or working on crossings, or working on dog distraction, there's always something that a dog might struggle with that you're going to have to work through or work with them consistently to make sure that they are performing for you at their peak. If you don't have the time to devote to training, your dog's abilities are going to slip over time, and eventually they aren't going to be able to work for you anymore. So that's a very important thing, to make sure that you're able to do that, to make sure that you understand that that's an important part of getting a guide dog and maintaining it at its highest level. And the final question that I want to look at is, are you able to deal with the emotional toll of losing a dog or retiring a dog and getting a new dog? It's not something that you want to think about right when you're getting a brand new dog. It's very exciting, but dogs don't live forever, and it's very sad and it can be very upsetting when you have to retire your dog or move to a new dog and develop new bonds all over again every 8 to 10 years. Now that I've given you difficult questions to consider, I want to chat briefly about the benefits. Guide dogs do very well in varied environments, in complex environments like malls, movie theaters. They can handle finding different objects, which I've always found really helpful. If I get disoriented in a store, my dog can find the way out. If I can't find the door, my dog will find the door, the elevator, stairs. Those are all things that my dog can find for me, and I find that really useful because my cane has never been able to do that. I like being able to work seamlessly where I'm not bumping into things constantly. I love having that freedom with a guide dog. I travel faster with a guide dog. So if those are some of the things that you would prefer when you're traveling, a guide dog may be a better option for you. Now let's talk about the final section, which is how to choose the right guide dog school for you. The first thing that you're going to want to consider is breed. If breed is important to you, you will need to look at which specific school has the dog breed that you're looking at. If you need a standard poodle for allergy reasons, only specific guide dog schools will train standard poodles. If you only want to work with German Shepherds, again, you may have to go to a very specific guide dog school to find a German Shepherd. If you want a Bernese Mountain Dog, you're going to have to, again, go to a very specific guide dog school to get a dog of that breed. Most guide dog schools, however, will work with a variety of labs, retrievers, or mixes between those. If you don't have a preference, you can pretty much choose any school that you like. The next thing that you're going to want to consider is what financial assistance is your school going to provide, if any? Some schools will provide for your dog's food and vet bills. Some schools will provide for vet bills. Some schools will provide for emergency situations only. Some schools will not have the ability to do any of that, and all of the costs are on you. If you have a limited budget or you would like help with vet bills, looking at what's available through a potential school is important. The next thing you might want to consider is the ideology behind the school. What specific type of training do they use? Do you want to have a dog that uses food reward, so is very positively motivated to do with rewards through food? Do you prefer the domination approach, where you are in control of the dog? When the dog makes a mistake, you have to give them a correction. Do you feel that you should own your dog? Do you feel that the school should own the dog? Would you like to keep your dog on retirement? Some schools make the dog go back to school upon retirement. Some schools will have an option whether you would like to keep the dog for yourself or send the dog back. And other schools, you can keep the dog for their entire life. Would you like to own your dog? Some schools, you will own your dog. You will pay a ceremonial amount, or you will have to pay to get your guide dog. For other schools, you can apply to own your guide dog. For other schools, the dog will always be owned by the guide dog school. Again, if you have a preference, you will have to look into which school does that. What type of equipment the dog uses may also be important to you. So whether they're using full chain collars or choke collars versus half choke collars like martingales, or gentle leaders where they have a band that goes across the dog's nose so you can help control their head. There's lots of different methodologies and styles of training for dogs. So do your research, look into what's available, and decide which one suits you best. If you don't know or you have questions, talk to lots of different guide dog users. By all means, you can leave your questions for me in the comments down below and I'll answer them to the best of my personal experience, but try and get opinions from lots of different people, because each person is going to have a slightly different opinion on what the right way is, because there is no one right way. The other factors that you might want to consider is the length of training time. Some schools will train their dogs for a longer period of time, some for a shorter period of time, and how long you have to train with the dog. For some schools it's 2 weeks, for some it's 3, for some it's 4, for some it's 2 months. So it's going to depend significantly on how busy your life is and how long you would like to build that bond, or how long you'd like to work with trainers, how long you're going to want to develop those skills with your guide dog. Another factor you may want to consider is home-based training versus campus-based training. Many schools have campuses or hotels where they bring you into a centralized location where you can train with a bunch of other guide dogs simultaneously. There are advantages and disadvantages to that, whether you want to build relationships with other guide dog users. If you don't get the right dog, they can probably switch you out with another dog quickly, but home-based is probably a lot more convenient for a lot of people, where they bring a trainer to you, they bring the dog to you, and you train using things that are actually functional for your life, like the routes to your work. You train using those places that you already go to. One final one here I almost forgot is, do you want to know who your puppy raisers are? It can be very polarizing for some people. They may want no contact with anyone who's helped raise their dog. And for other people, they want to build a relationship with the person who spent time training their dog. Personally, I find there's no problem, and I actually enjoy keeping up with puppy raisers and seeing how their lives are going and giving them updates on my dog, but that's not for everyone. Depending on the school you choose, that may be encouraged or discouraged. I think that just about covers an extensive list on things you should think about if you're looking into getting a guide dog. Again, I think it's a very personal decision whether you choose to or not. It's not right for everybody, but it can be an incredible benefit if you are active, if you are going places, if you would like the companionship of having a furry friend with you 24 hours a day. If you enjoy content like this, you can keep up with all my other social media accounts. They're linked in the description, and I have my Twitch streams on Sundays and some Tuesdays, 7:30 Mountain Standard Time. But that's all for today. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.